My twin brother jumped off the school roof and died. My parents didn't call the cops. They told me to come home from the war, put on his clothes, and go to school as him. They wanted me to make every kid who bullied him bleed. Even his perfect ex-girlfriend would end up on her knees, begging Mom. I was crying so hard on the phone, I could barely make out the words. Your brother Leo's dead. He killed himself. It hit me like a truck. I couldn't breathe. Are you sure? I tried to keep my voice level. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Yes, Cole. I bullied him. They destroyed him.
It was awful, she sobbed.
Don't tell anyone. Don't call the police yet. Put him somewhere cold. I need to see him myself. I sounded calm. I wasn't even close. Already done. When are you coming home now? I'm leaving the base.
Mom, just hang on.
I hung up. Had to know what happened. My little brother, the kid I'd spent my whole life protecting, was lying in a freezer. How could he kill himself? My flight landed. And I got on the motorcycle my contact had left for me and rode straight out to my parents' place in the country. I skipped the house and went to the barn. There was a rented freezer truck sitting in the driveway. Dad had pulled some strings to get it. Mom took one look at me and broke down. Dad just pointed at the truck doors. He couldn't get a word out. I opened the latch. Leo was in there. Under a thin layer of frost, something in my chest went white hot. Leo and I were identical. Put us in the same clothes and only Mom could tell us apart. Even Dad mixed us up. I started checking his body. I needed to know exactly how he died. It made my blood run cold. Cigarette burns, deep cuts from a blade.
Stitches somebody had done themselves.
He'd been tortured before he died. The grief in me turned into something harder. I touched his cold cheek. All I could see was him as a little kid running after me, yelling my name. This time, buddy. I'm burning their whole world down. I climbed out of the truck. Mom grabbed my hand and fell apart. He suffered so much, Cole. Your father and I were useless. We went to the school, and they threatened us. We tried the local cops, and they told us to settle it quietly. Nobody cared. I shut my eyes. When I opened them, I was seeing red. I needed names. I needed to know who pushed him to it. I'd spent years with a private mercenary outfit. I thought I was done feeling anything about blood and bodies, but looking at my twin in that truck
felt like somebody had torn a piece out of me.
The White Wolf. Everybody in the squad was scared. Didn't exist anymore. There was just a brother who wanted payback. Dad was crying quietly in the corner. The whole house felt like it was suffocating. Mom, where's Leo's phone? My voice came out low and flat. She ran inside and brought it to me. I unlocked it. The notifications were a horror show. Yo, Leo, you dead yet? Skip today? I told you today. You're my dog, and you're licking my shoes in front of everybody. Where the hell are you? You better have my $200 tomorrow or you're done. Leo,
I've still got that video of you.
Wonder how your precious girlfriend Amber would feel if I posted it? Show up tomorrow or else. There was a video file under the text. I opened it. Leo cornered a group of guys standing around him, humiliating him, laughing and kicking him. I couldn't watch the whole thing. Every message felt like a knife going in sideways. My knuckles went white around that phone. I promised him right there I'd make every one of them wish they'd never been born. Next morning, I put on Leo's blazer and walked through the gates of St. Jude's Academy. The second I walked into homeroom, the whole class went quiet and started smirking at me. I knew which class was his. I didn't know which desk, so I walked up to some guy near the front. Where do I sit? He blinked, then laughed loud. They finally knock your brain loose. Yesterday, you don't even know your own seat. Trash sits in the trash corner. Obviously, the room snickered. I went to the desk in the back corner. It was covered in graffiti, dirt, and garbage. I picked up Leo's backpack. When I opened it, ripped textbooks and shredded homework fell out. My face didn't move. Inside, something was waking up. The more I saw, the more I understood what my brother's life had actually been. I scooped the trash off my desk and dumped it in the classroom wastebasket. Then, while everybody watched, I walked over to the guy who'd mouthed off and emptied the whole bin onto his desk. What the hell? You wanna die, Vance? He came out of his chair swinging at my face. I slipped it, put the trash can over his head, kicked his knees out and dropped him back into his seat. He tore the bin off, cursing, trying to get up. I slapped him hard. The crack sounded like a gunshot. Then I grabbed the back of his neck and put his face flat on the desk. A spoiled prep school kid isn't much against military training. I found a pressure point on his neck, and he let out this thin little shriek. Who messed with my desk? I said, barely a whisper. I pressed harder. I don't know. I dug my thumb in deeper. He screamed like a stuck pig, legs kicking. Stop, stop. It was Jared, Chloe, and Mia.
2.
They dumped it on your desk. Nobody else. I swear he was shaking. I let go. He slumped over the desk crying. The room was dead silent. Nobody could believe what they were looking at. Damn, Vance. Think you're tough, now you're dead. After school freak. A big kid stood up and pointed at me.
Textbook football type.
I smiled and walked toward him. Why wait? Let's do it now. Brandon looked surprised. He glanced at his friends, remembered he had an audience, and figured he couldn't back off. He came at me with an open hand. To the rest of the class, Brandon was a tank.
Me?
He was moving underwater. Before his hand got anywhere near me, my fingers clamped into the soft spot under his armpit, like a pair of pliers. He froze, face twisting. Let go, he screamed. I didn't say anything. I twisted his arm behind his back and locked the elbow. The harder he fought, the closer that bone got to snapping. He was crying, "Stop, please. It hurts."
Please.
Making a varsity athlete cry in front of his friends takes a kind of pain most people can't imagine. I leaned in. Jared, Chloe, and Mia trashed my desk. What are you going to do about that, Brandon? I'll handle it. I'll beat the hell out of them for you. Face was purple. I let him go. He fell into his chair, shirt soaked, gasping. You could have heard a pin drop. Brandon caught his breath, got up, walked over to Jared, and kicked him out of his chair. You idiot. Why the hell did you mess with his desk and drag me into it? He kept kicking him, working out every bit of his own humiliation. Jared curled up under the desk begging. Chloe and Mia went white and started backing toward the door. Clean my desk, I said. Put it back where it belongs. And we're even. Both girls ran for paper towels and disinfectant and started scrubbing, like their lives were on the line. One of them ran to the bathroom for fresh water. They were almost done when the door opened. 2 guys and a girl walked in. Chloe, Mia, have you lost your minds? The one in front was good-looking, designer jacket over his uniform. He frowned at me sitting on the edge of a desk. Why are you cleaning up for this loser? I pulled out my phone and checked the photos. Tristan Sterling, golden boy, billionaire's kid. According to Leo's phone, Tristan was behind almost all of it. I got up and walked toward him. Before I could say anything, he sneered and threw a punch at my jaw. I caught his fist in the air. One twist to my wrist, and there was a loud pop. Dislocated shoulder.
Ah.
My arm. You broke my arm. He went down on his knees. He'd never felt real pain in his life. The untouchable rich kid disappeared in about half a second. What was left was a whimpering child. I shook the bad arm a little. He screamed louder. Snot and tears everywhere. The bell for next period rang. I grabbed his arm, gave it a sharp pull, and put the joint back. The worst of it stopped right away, but he was shaking and covered in cold sweat. Let's meet up after school. Usual spot, I said, tapping his cheek. Then I went back to my clean desk. Nobody made a sound. His friends were staring at me like I was a ghost. And Tristan could finally stand. He looked at me with real murder in his eyes. I winked at him. At lunch, I walked out to the basketball courts by the cafeteria. Tristan showed up a few minutes later, with a dozen huge guys off the sports teams. A few of them had baseball bats. You're dead, Vance. You got lucky this morning. That's all. Get him. I'll cover the hospital bills. Break his legs. They rushed me. I covered up, protected my organs, and let them hit me. But I wasn't just eating it. I was working close, putting elbows and knees into their joints. Every time one of them got near from outside, it looked like I was getting jumped. In reality, the guys swinging at me were the ones making noise. After about 3 minutes, I saw my opening. I broke out of the circle looking beat up and ran for the alley behind the gym. No cameras back there. I stopped. They caught up laughing. Nowhere to run now, huh? You broke my hand with your elbow, freak. I'm going to cave your head in. The guys with the bat swung. I quit defending. I stepped inside their reach. Elbows to the throat, knees to the ribs, sweeps to the ankles. The alley filled up with the sound of bones going. They couldn't touch me. 2 minutes later, all 12 of them were on the ground groaning, holding whatever I'd broken. Tristan was frozen at the back. No way. Leo's a coward. How are you fighting like this? I walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. You got away with torturing my brother. Because the school board protects you. Because your dad owns this place, right? His eyes went wide. He tried to puff his chest out. Anyway, if you know who my dad is, you better back off. One phone call, and you're in prison. I laughed. I took a long metal nail out of my pocket, flicked my lighter, and started heating the tip. Tell me something, I said. What's the deal between the principal and your dad? Tristan stared at the glowing metal, chest heaving. What are you talking about? My dad donated some money to the school. That's. I put the hot nail into a nerve cluster near his collarbone and covered his mouth with my hand. He went stiff, eyes bulging. The shing 5 seconds, and I pulled it out. The smell of burnt skin came up between us. He hit the ground shaking, drenched in sweat. I flicked the lighter again and started heating the nail. Old interrogation trick. It won't kill you, but that spot's going to burn for a week. 1 or 2, you can live with 10. The pain gives you a fever that won't break. Feels like you're burning alive. And no painkiller on earth touches it. The record's 27. That guy lasted 11 days before his heart quit. Want to find out what your number is? Tristan's eyes flickered, desperate, tracking the glowing tip of the nail as it hovered an inch from his jawline. The smell of his burned flesh from the collarbone burn still hung thick between us in the muggy shade of the alley, mixing with the damp stench of moss and rust off the gym's back wall. Wait, wait, he squeaked, his voice cracking out of its smooth, preppy register into something pathetic. The principal, Vane.
He's in on it.
My dad bought him. Out 2 years ago. Vane's got debt, gambling debts with guys in the city. My dad pays them off every quarter through a shell company. Keep going, I said, my thumb flicking the wheel of the lighter again.
Click, click.
The flame licked the steel. The video. Tristan gagged, pressing his shoulder against the dirty brickwork to drag himself backward. The video wasn't just us messing with him. It was Vane's idea. He told us to push Leo until he broke, so my dad could buy up your family's land out on the county line. The school wants to expand the athletic grounds, but your dad wouldn't sell. Vane said if we broke Leo, your parents would be too bankrupt from medical bills or too distracted to fight the land. Seizure. I stopped heating the nail. The hot metal cooled from cherry red to a dull, oily
gray. Land.
A real estate grab. My brother didn't die because of teenage cruelty alone. He died because a bunch of parasites saw a quiet kid with soft eyes and decided his life was acceptable. A collateral for a few hundred acres of country dirt and a tax write-off. Where's the original file? I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. The unedited video. Amber. Tristan wheezed, clutching his dislocated shoulder where I'd popped it. Back in. Sweat dripped off his chin, smearing through the dust on his face. Amber has it on a drive. In her locker. She helped edit out the parts where Vane was standing in the hallway watching us do it. She kept the raw footage as insurance so my dad wouldn't throw her family under the bus when her dad's firm went under. Amber, I repeated. His perfect ex-girlfriend. The girl my mother said would end up on her knees. I leaned down, grabbed Tristan by the collar of his $600 jacket, and pulled his face 6 inches from mine. I could see the tiny red capillaries, broken in his pupils from shock. If you tell your dad I'm back, I whispered. If you give him even a whisper, that the boy walking these halls isn't the boy you pushed off that roof. I won't use a hot nail next time. I'll bring the tools I used in Fallujah. Understand? He nodded so hard his teeth clicked together. I let go. He crumpled onto the wet asphalt, weeping into his sleeves while the dozen varsity athletes I'd broken lay around him, groaning like dying cattle in a slaughterhouse chute. The second period bell rang through the intercoms of St. Jude's Academy like a funeral knell. I walked the marble hallways with Leo's oversized blazer slouched over my shoulders. My posture was wrong. I had to actively force my spine to curve, to lose the rigid, square-shouldered stance 5 years of military contract work had burned into my posture. I had to walk like a boy who expected the floor to give way beneath him at any moment. When I reached the 3rd floor art wing, I found her. Amber Vance. She was standing by a row of brass knob lockers, her uniform skirt pleated to perfection, blonde hair pinned back with a pearl clip. To anyone passing by, she looked like an angel built in a country club factory. But as I approached, I saw her hands. She was trying to fit a brass key into her locker padlock, and her fingers were trembling so violently the key kept scraping uselessly against the metal. She heard my loafers scuffing the floor and spun around. When her eyes met mine, every drop of blood left her face. She looked like she was seeing a ghost stepping out of a shallow grave. Leo, she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. Her hand flew to her throat. They said I jumped, I said softly, stepping closer until I blocked the light from the tall, arched windows behind her. They said I was dead, Amber. You shouldn't be here, she stammered, stepping back until her spine hit the cool metal lockers. Tristan said if you showed up again, he'd Tristan is currently crawling across the gravel behind the gymnasium. I interrupted. I reached out and took the key from her cold, numb fingers.
He
Won't be bothering anyone for the rest of the day. Her blue eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror. She looked at my eyes, really looked, and I felt the exact moment she realized the boy standing in front of her wasn't the boy she'd helped destroy. Leo's eyes had been soft, watery, filled with a desperate longing to be loved. Mine were hollow. Mine were the eyes of a man who had watched entire squads burn in steel husks on dirt roads in Helmand. "You're not him," she whispered, her voice cracking. Who are you?" "I'm the twin who went to war," I said quietly, inserting the key into her locker. I popped the latch open. "And I'm here to collect Leo's debts." She sank to her knees right there on the polished linoleum, just like my mother had said she would. Her head bowed, her framed designer glasses sliding down the bridge of her nose as heavy, silent tears splattered onto the white tile floor. "I didn't want to," she sobbed, clutching her skirts. "Cole, is that your name?"
Cole?
"Tristan's father. He has photos of my dad. Financial stuff. Illegal
Stuff.
He forced me to isolate Leo. He made me pretend to like him so I could get his passwords so I could invite him to the roof that afternoon." I froze. The breath trapped in my throat felt like liquid glass. "Invite him to the roof?"
I asked.
The words came out entirely devoid of tone. "Tristan told me to text him," she whimpered, covering her face with her trembling hands. "To tell him I wanted to make up, that I'd meet him on the roof behind the bell tower." Leo was so happy, he thought I actually cared. When he got up there, Tristan and 5 other guys were waiting, with baseball bats and a video camera. Principal Vane was standing by the access door holding the key. She didn't get to finish the sentence. I didn't strike her. I didn't lay a finger on her. But I reached into her locker, moved aside her soft silk scarves and expensive perfumes, and picked up the black metal flash drive tucked into the pocket of her spare sweater. "Is this the unedited footage?" I asked. She nodded rapidly, her face pressed against her knees.
Yes.
"Everything.
The
whole 40 minutes. The hit, the fall. All of it." I put the drive into my pocket. "Get up," I said. "Please don't kill me," she wept. "Please, Cole, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Getting up isn't for you," I said, staring down at her with dead eyes. "It's so. You can go down to Principal Vane's office. Tell him Leo Vance is waiting for him in the old library wing. Tell him if he doesn't come alone, the footage on this drive goes straight to the state prosecutor's office and every national news network before 5th period." She looked up at me, her face pale and streaked with mascara. "He won't come alone. He has security. Former cops." I gave her a thin, empty smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Good," I said. "I brought enough for all of them." The old library wing of St. Jude's had been closed since the 70s, locked away behind heavy oak doors at the far end of the Victorian building.
It was a
cavernous, dark hall lined with rotting wooden bookshelves, towering stained glass windows covered in decades of grime, and heavy iron chandeliers, suspended by thick, rusted chains. I sat on an overturned oak desk in the center of the dust-choked room, tossing a heavy brass paperweight from hand to hand.
clack, clack, clack.
10 minutes passed. Then, the heavy doors squeaked open. Principal Arthur Vane stepped through the threshold. He was a tall, silver-haired man in a tailored 3-piece suit, carrying the relaxed arrogance of a man who had spent 30 years hiding behind institutional wealth and corrupt local judges. Behind him came 2 men in dark windbreakers, built square, ears calloused, handguns discreetly bulged under their left armpits. Local ex-cops working high-end private security. Vane adjusted his gold-rimmed spectacles, looking at me with mild annoyance, as if I were a speck of dirt on his suede shoes. "Leo," Vane said, his voice smooth, resonant, trained for school assemblies and country club dinners. "Amber came to my office in quite a state. She said you were making threats. I must say, I'm surprised to see you standing upright. The fall from the East Wing roof should have left you in a wheelchair if not a casket." He didn't even know Leo was dead. He thought my brother was lying in some hospital bed or that he'd somehow survived the plunge. He hadn't even bothered to check the freezer truck sitting in my parents' driveway. To him, my brother was just a nuisance that hadn't been erased cleanly enough. "The roof was high," I said, my voice echoing off the vaulted wooden ceiling. 32 feet down onto concrete. A boy falls 32 feet. He breaks his ribs, his legs, his neck. Vane chuckled, taking a gold cigar case from his breast pocket. Then consider yourself lucky, boy. But this little performance ends now. Hand over whatever flash drive Amber gave you, take your dropout papers, and your family can keep that miserable little farm on the county line. Try to push this, and I'll have Deputy Miller arrest your father for tax fraud before nightfall. Do you understand me? I stopped tossing the brass paperweight. I looked at the two security guards flanking him. They were relaxed hands, resting near their hips, viewing me as a scrawny, traumatized high school kid. They hadn't checked my balance. They hadn't noticed the way my weight was centered, the way my feet were anchored, or the complete absence of adrenaline. Shakes in my hands. You took money from Richard Sterling, I said quietly. Vane lit his cigar, blowing a thick ring of blue smoke toward the dark rafters. Richard Sterling built this school's new science wing. He funds my retirement portfolio. You are the son of a dirt farmer who couldn't even keep his own kid from crying in the hallways. Know your place, Vance. My name isn't Leo, I said. Vane paused, the lighter still burning near his chin.
What?
Leo died 3 days ago, I said, stepping down from the desk. My boots clicked heavily against the parquet floor, not the hurried, hesitant shuffle of a bullied boy, but the deliberate, heavy cadence of a predator stepping out of the tree line. His heart stopped in the back of an ambulance that your deputy friend turned away. Right now, he's lying in a commercial meat freezer on our farm, frozen solid under a layer of frost. The two security guards stiffened. The one on the left, a guy with a broken nose and a military tattoo peeking out of his sleeve, suddenly narrowed his eyes. He recognized something in my posture. His hand moved toward his holster. He's dead. Vane blinked, a flicker of genuine hesitation crossing his face, before his arrogance reasserted itself.
Well,
that's unfortunate. A tragedy, really, but it changes nothing. If he's dead, you have even less leverage.
Who
are you? I'm Cole, I said. Leo's older brother. The one the army took off the streets 5 years ago. The guard on the left lunged. Boss, get out. He didn't finish the sentence. I hit the gap between us in a fraction of a second. 5 years of close quarters combat inside narrow mud brick compounds don't leave room for wasted motion.
I
didn't throw a high school punch. I stepped inside his reach, my left hand slapping his drawing wrist down against his holster, while the heel of my right hand slammed upward into his nose bone. Crack. The cartilage sheared upward into his sinus cavity. He gagged, his eyes rolling back as his knees buckled. Before he hit the floor, I drew his Glock 19 from his hip, racked the slide with a single smooth motion, and whipped the heavy steel frame across the second guard's temple.
Thud.
The second guard went down like a sack of wet concrete, his skull bouncing off the rotting floorboards. Blood pool began spreading instantly across the varnish. Total time elapsed 2.4 seconds. Silence slammed back into the library, heavy and suffocating. Principal Vane dropped a cigar. The lit tip rolled across the floor, smoking weakly against the dry wood. His jaw hung open, his face pale as parchment, his gold-rimmed glasses crooked on his nose. He stumbled backward, his thighs hitting a display table, sending glass cases of antique books shattering onto the floor. You? Vane stammered, his aristocratic voice reduced to a dry, croaking rasp. You're a monster? I walked over to him, the captured Glock held casually at my side, barrel pointed at the floor. I'm not a monster, Arthur, I said, reaching out and gently straightening his
silk tie.
I'm a contractor, and my family just gave me a brand new assignment. I'll pay you, Vane shrieked, falling back against the broken glass, his hands up in a desperate defensive ward. Whatever Sterling gave me, I'll double it.
I
have offshore accounts. Hundreds of thousands. I can give you the names of every judge, every cop on Sterling's payroll. I don't want your money, Arthur, I said softly, grabbing him by his lapels and lifting his 6-foot frame off his feet until his polished shoes dangled 3 inches above the glass shards. I want you to make a phone call. Who? Who do I call? He wept, slobber running down his chin. Richard Sterling, I said into his ear, my voice dropping into a low, terrifying hum. Tell him the problem with the Vance boy is solved. Tell him to bring his legal team and his private security down to the school tonight at 8 o'clock to finalize the land transfer documents. Tell him your personal safe has the signed deed. Vane swallowed hard, his throat clicking. And then what? I looked into his shaking, terrified eyes, letting him see the deep, bottomless abyss behind mine. Then, I whispered, I show Richard Sterling what happens when you try to buy a piece of dirt that's soaked in my brother's blood. By 7 o'clock that evening, the rain had started. It came down in heavy, cold sheets, hammering against the leaded glass windows of St. Jude's Academy, drowning the manicured lawns in dark, muddy runoff. The school was empty. The students had been dismissed early on my orders forced. Through a series of anonymous bomb threats I'd phoned into the local dispatch. From 5 different burner phones across town, the corridors were pitch black, lit only by the occasional flash of lightning, splitting the storm outside. I stood in the center of the main atrium, beneath the grand marble staircase.
I
Had stripped off Leo's ill-fitting blazer. Underneath, I wore my old tactical, black turtleneck, military cargo pants, and combat boots. My gear was laid out. On the polished marble floor before me, 3 extra magazines for the Glock, a tactical combat knife with a black serrated blade, a roll of heavy zip ties, and a high-grade military incendiary canister I'd brought back in my duffel bag from my last deployment overseas. My phone buzzed on the marble slab beside me. I picked it up. It was my mother. Cole? Her voice came through, thin, trembling, competing with the static of
the storm outside the farm.
Cole, where are you? Your father, he's out in the barn with Leo. He won't come inside. He keeps talking to him. I'm at the school, Mom, I said softly, checking the spring tension in the Glock magazine. Cole, please, she sobbed into the receiver. Don't do anything that takes you away from us again. We lost one boy today. I can't lose you to a prison cell. You won't lose me, Mom, I said. The police aren't going to arrest me. How can you be sure? Because, I said, staring up at the stained glass crest of St. Jude's, towering above the Grand Hall, by the time the sun comes up tomorrow, there won't be anyone left in this town brave enough to write my name on a warrant. I hung up. A sharp set of headlights cut through the heavy rain outside, sweeping across the tall stained glass windows of the front entrance. 3 luxury SUVs, black Cadillac Escalades with tinted windows, pulled up to the arched stone portico. Heavy doors slammed shut in the storm. Richard Sterling had arrived. I stepped back into the deep shadows beneath the grand staircase, letting the darkness swallow me whole. The white wolf didn't fight in the light. In the light, people saw a man. In the dark, they saw the nightmare they had paid to
create.
The heavy front doors of the academy were thrown open. 4 men stepped inside first. Professional private security, not the local ex-cop Hicks Vane had hired. These guys moved with crisp, tactical discipline. Suppressed submachine guns held at low ready, tactical flashlights cutting beams through the dark, dust-filled air of the atrium. Behind them walked Richard Sterling. He was in his late 50s, immaculate, wearing an expensive cashmere overcoat over a dark suit. His face was hard, cold, sculpted by decades of hostile corporate takeovers and unpunished corruption. Beside him was his son, Tristan, whose arm was bound in a tight sling, his face still pale with terror. Vane, Sterling's voice boomed through the high-arched atrium, echoing off the marble pillars. Vane, get down here. What is the meaning of this darkness?
Why?
Are the gates unlocked? No answer came. Only the low hum of the rain hammering the roof overhead. Check the perimeter. Sterling ordered his lead security contractor, a burly guy with a scarred neck. Find Vane. If this is some sort of extortion play for more money, I'll have his license revoked by midnight. Sir, the lead contractor murmured, sweeping his flashlight across the floor.
He stopped.
The beam of light illuminated a dark, sticky trail of blood leading toward the hallway that led to the old library. We have a blood trail. Tristan gasped, grabbing his father's coat with his good hand. Dad, I told you. It's him. It's Leo. He's not normal. He broke my arm with one hand. Shut up, you idiot. Sterling snapped, backhanding his son across the cheek. He's a terrified 16-year-old boy whose family is broke. You let a scrawny loser frighten you because you're weak. Sterling looked at his contractors. Clear the room. If the kid is here, break his legs and throw him in the back of the SUV. We'll take care of the land deeds at his parents' house tonight. The 4 security men split up, moving in tactical pairs. 2 headed down the eastern corridor toward the classrooms. 2 moved toward the grand staircase. I waited until the pair near the staircase passed my position in the shadow. The back guy moved first. As his shoulder cleared the edge of the marble pillar, my arm came around his throat in a tight, crushing rear naked choke. I didn't
Give him a chance to tap or draw his sidearm.
I drove my knee sharp into the back of his knee, collapsing his base and twisted his neck until his vertebrae gave a wet, dull pop. I caught his suppressed submachine gun before it hit the marble floor. The front guard turned, sensing the sudden absence of his partner. Dave. He swept his flashlight back toward the pillar. The beam caught me holding his partner's limp body. Before he could raise his weapon or scream, I fired 2 silent rounds from the suppressed weapon straight through his chest plate. The heavy subsonic rounds punched through his Kevlar, collapsing his lungs. He slid down the wall with a soft, bloody hiss.
2 down.
2 to go. What was that? Sterling's voice echoed from the center of the atrium.
Dennis.
Report. I dropped the body, picked up 2 extra flashbang grenades from the dead guard's tactical vest, and stepped out from behind the pillar into the dim, shadowy light of the main hall. Tristan saw me first. He let out a shriek that sounded like a dying bird, staggering backward until his spine slammed into the grand oak doors.
Dad.
It's him. It's him. Richard Sterling turned slowly, his hard, arrogant eyes locked onto me as I walked out of the shadows. He saw the suppressed submachine gun hanging loosely. In my right hand, the combat knife at my belt, and the blood smearing my tactical boots. For the first time in his life, Richard Sterling's face registered something other than absolute control. Who the hell are you? Sterling demanded, his voice trembling slightly despite his effort to keep it steady. You aren't Leo Vance. No, I said, stopping 10 feet from him. Leo was a kid who liked drawing in his sketchbook and playing acoustic guitar. He was a kid who cried when a stray dog died on the highway. I raised the gun, pointing the black suppressor straight at Sterling's forehead. I'm the twin you didn't know about, I said softly. The one the United States government spent 5 years training to butcher men like you in bad places. The remaining 2 security guards burst out from the eastern hallway, weapons
raised. I didn't even look at them.
I pulled the ring on the flashbang grenade in my left hand and dropped it at my feet, stepping backward behind the heavy marble pillar as the device detonated. Bang flash. A blinding white light and a deafening 170 decibel shockwave shattered the atrium glass, blowing out the stained glass windows in a shower of colored rain. The 2 guards shrieked, clutching their ears, blinded and disoriented as they staggered across the floor. I stepped out from behind the pillar and put 2 rounds into each of their chests with cold, mechanical precision. They hit the floor like wet sandbags. The smoke from the flashbang drifted slowly through the ruined atrium.
Rain
poured through the shattered stained glass windows above, soaking the marble floor, mixing with the blood pooling around the bodies of Sterling's private army. Richard Sterling was on his knees, his hands covering his bloodied ears, his nose bleeding from the pressure wave. Tristan was curled into a tight ball near the entrance, weeping hysterically, throwing up his school lunch onto the polished tile. I walked over to Sterling, grabbed him by his silver hair, and hauled him to his
feet.
You wanted my family's land, Richard? I asked, my voice cutting through the ringing in his ears like a razor blade. You wanted to build a new sports complex over my father's farm? Please. Sterling gasped, his arrogant veneer completely shattered.
Blood
dripped from his nostrils onto his white silk shirt. I have millions in offshore accounts. I'll give you everything, just let my son live. Your son, I repeated, looking over at Tristan, who was shivering like a beaten dog on the floor. Your son made my brother sit in a bathroom stall while 4 guys poured bucket water over his head. Your son put cigarette burns on his wrists. Your son filmed him begging for his life. I pulled the flash drive out of my pocket and held it in front of Sterling's
face.
Everything you did to my family is on this drive, I said. Every bribe to Principal Vane. Every transfer order to Deputy Miller. The full, unedited footage of my brother being murdered on your order. It won't hold up in court. Sterling croaked, trying to find a shred of his former power. I own the judges. I own the state prosecutor. You can't touch me with a piece of plastic. You're right, I said, putting the drive back into my pocket. Courts are for people who believe in the system. I stopped believing in the system when I was 19 years old in a dusty ditch outside Kandahar. I pulled the incendiary canister from my belt, popped the safety pin with my thumb, and slammed it down onto the middle of the antique wooden reception desk. In the center of the atrium, the thermite ignited instantly. A brilliant, white-hot chemical fire erupted, burning at 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It instantly scorched through the Heavy oak desk, melting the floor beneath it, spitting sparks 15 feet into
the air.
the dry, 100-year-old wood paneling of St. Jude's Academy caught fire in seconds. What? What are you doing? Sterling screamed, staring in horror as the flames roared up the grand marble staircase, devouring the velvet curtains and ancient portraits of the school's founders. I promised my brother I'd burn your whole world down, I said softly. I grabbed Sterling by the collar and dragged him toward the shattered front entrance, throwing him down onto the rain-slicked stone steps outside. I reached back, grabbed Tristan by his good arm, and tossed him down beside his father. Look at it, Richard, I said, standing above them in the pouring rain as the roaring flames burst through the upper-story windows of St. Jude's Academy, turning the sky orange against the dark storm clouds. That's your legacy. That's what your money bought you. In the distance, the faint wail of police sirens began to rise through the night, echoing across the valley from the town center. Deputy Miller and his corrupt cronies were finally coming. I pulled out my phone, dialed the emergency services number, and pressed the speaker button. 911. What is your emergency? The dispatcher's voice came through the speaker. I held the phone down to Richard Sterling's face.
Tell her, I said.
Sterling looked up at me, his eyes wide with absolute, shattered ruin.
The
firelight reflected in his tears. My name is Richard Sterling, he sobbed into the phone, his voice broadcast across the open line. I ordered the murder of Leo Vance.
I
bribed Principal Arthur Vane. I paid off Deputy Miller. Please send someone, he's going to burn us alive. I took the phone back, snapped it in half with my bare hands, and tossed the pieces into the roaring inferno behind me. I looked down at Tristan and his father one last time. They were broken.
Not
Physically, I hadn't needed to snap their necks like the contractors inside.
They
were ruined in every way that mattered to men like them. Their reputation, their wealth, their freedom, and their impunity had been incinerated in less than an
hour.
If I ever see either of you near my parents' farm again, I whispered the wind, carrying my words through the roar of the fire and the rain. I won't bring a
phone.
I'll bring a shovel. I turned my back on them and walked off into the darkness of the woods bordering the academy grounds. 3 days later, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the county air crisp, clean, and smelling of damp pine and wet earth. The sun was just beginning to peek over the rolling hills of the countryside, casting long, golden light across the family farm. In the quiet clearing behind the barn, beneath the tall branches of an old oak tree where Leo and I used to build wooden forts as kids, there was a fresh mound of rich, dark earth. A simple wooden cross stood at the head of the grave, carved by my father's trembling hands. My parents stood together near the tree. My father had his arm wrapped tightly around my mother's shoulders. For the first time in years, my father didn't look
defeated.
His posture was still weary, his face lined with grief. But the hollow, suffocating terror that had gripped his eyes was gone. The news had dominated the state for 72 hours. Principal Vane had been arrested at the airport trying to board a flight to Switzerland. Deputy Miller was currently sitting in a federal holding cell awaiting indictment for conspiracy and evidence tampering. Richard Sterling's corporate board had stripped him of every asset, and his son Tristan had been transferred to a state juvenile detention center after the unedited video from Amber's flash drive was leaked to every major news outlet in the country. St. Jude's Academy was nothing more than a blackened, smoking shell of stone and scorched steel. I stood 50 yards back near the treeline, wearing my worn leather jacket and holding the helmet to the motorcycle my military contact had left for me. My mother turned and saw me standing in the shadows of the pines. She walked over, her feet crunching softly in the morning frost. She looked at my face, her eyes searching mine, not looking for Leo anymore, but looking for the son who had gone off to war and come back just long enough to save what was left of their lives. She reached up and touched my cheek. Her hand was warm. He's at peace now, Cole, she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. We gave him a proper burial. The pastor came from town. Real people came. People who loved him. Good, I said softly. Are you staying? She asked, though the answer was already in her voice. I looked past her at the quiet grave beneath the oak tree, then out toward the highway where the horizon met the endless gray sky. The white wolf doesn't stay in one place long, Mom, I said gently. If I stay, the federal investigators will start asking questions about who cleared out those 4 contractors in the atrium. It's better if Cole Vance stays dead on paper, too. She pulled me into a tight, fierce embrace, burying her face against my chest.
I
Wrapped my arms around her, holding her for a long moment, letting the warmth of my family wash over the cold, hard edges of my soul. Thank you, my boy, she wept quietly into my jacket. Thank you for bringing him home. He was my brother, Mom, I said into her hair. I promised him I'd protect him. I stepped back, pulled my leather gloves on, and zipped up my jacket. I walked over to the motorcycle parked by the gravel track, swinging my leg over the seat and kicking the engine to life. The heavy roar of the exhaust echoed through the quiet valley. Before I pulled onto the main road, I looked back one last time. My mother and father were standing by the grave beneath the oak tree, holding hands, watching the sunrise break through the clouds, casting gold across my brother's resting place. I put my helmet on, snapped the visor down, and twisted the throttle, leaving the ghost of St. Jude's Academy and the ashes of my brother's killers far behind me in the rearview mirror, riding straight into the cold, quiet unknown.